So, Courtney, welcome to Australia. I mean, how has your stay been so far?
Oh, great. Thank you very much. It's very nice. I mean, I actually think it's a beautiful city, Sydney. I'm going to go to Melbourne tonight, so I get to see Melbourne a little bit, although they don't let me out much, so I'm just sort of driving by stuff. But everybody's really nice, and the reaction to our movies and our horror brand is great, so, I'm happy. A little bit tired, but happy.
Are you a fan of Australian horror films and exploitation films?
I'm in 2 days here, I'm learning an awful lot about them, so I'm actually getting a bunch of them and looking at them. I don't know a lot that were brought up to me. I know the famous ones like Wolf Creek, we put out Dying Breed, for example. So there's certain movies that I know and some of the famous ones, but I'm understanding that there's a lot of good filmmakers here and some interesting stuff that's been done, and it kind of got my mind going to thinking maybe we can make one of our originals this year with one of the filmmakers from here and either remake one of the movies that was made, say, 5, 10 years ago that was great and make it part of our next After Dark originals, or just work with a filmmaker and do something else.
Sure. I mean, obviously, After Dark Originals is a big scheme for you, a big project. I mean, is part of the reason you're doing it because of the state of the horror industry at the moment? I mean, how do you feel the industry is going at the moment?
Not so well. You mean in the States or worldwide?
Worldwide, yeah.
Well, I think, the major studios have sort of fallen out of the horror business for the last 3, 4 years. You don't have the Weinsteins making a lot of horror films. I mean, there was Scream 4, a couple of things. Lionsgate isn't doing near as many as they used to do, and the major studios are doing one, maybe two, and a lot of that is to do with the recession and them honing in and doing sort of wider scale movies and more event-driven movies. As well, smaller producers fell out, and it's harder to sell the movies in the international market, which means people can't raise money to make those movies. We were always making them. For us, we were first buying them and distributing them under After Dark Horror Fest in the US, 8 Films to Die For, and then we started After Dark Originals 2 years ago and decided to make original horror films, but use the same model, put out 8, make the festival, make it fun. So I think it's a good time for us because by default we've become the biggest producer of horror movies in the United States because we produce more than anybody else, just by volume. And everybody knows us now in the industry to, if they want to get their movies, we actually make the movies. If it's something we want to do, we do it. It doesn't sit in development for 7 years. As far as the state of the industry, I think that's the part of the industry that's maybe a little bit broken. But as far as the fan base is concerned, I don't see any sort of smaller demand for the films or people not liking it. Those are very loyal fans to the genre. They love the genre.
And I guess a lot of these titles now, there's like Netflix and a lot more types of direct-to-DVD. The theatrical avenues aren't necessarily there for you anymore.
But that's never how we modeled ourselves. I mean, we weren't looking to, put our movies out on 2,000 screens in the United States. We were looking to do our film festival, put out 8 different movies over one weekend and make a fun event like a Rocky Horror event that the fans could go to, and then really it did become a DVD, a VOD, a digital, and a television brand, which we're absolutely fine with because in horror movies it's not like watching Avatar. You don't have to see it on the big screen. It's fun to see it on the big screen, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. We love that. But it's not an event film. So you can be just as happy, depending on who you are, watching it in your home theater, on your flat screen, watching it on your iPad, wherever. It's that type of fare.
And often you find horror fans in particular are hoarders. They love
Absolutely, absolutely. Or collecting DVDs, or now having the digital copy that they can put onto wherever they want, coming up the iCloud and everything that copies it. So that's the way of the future.
I mean, for you personally, I mean, have you always been a big horror fan? I mean, how did you get into horror films?
I watched The Exorcist when I was 5, and then The Omen a year later, and then Shining not too far after that, and Halloween, and I was pretty much jaded after that. I mean, that pretty much did it. Then Freddy came around. So, I was always a fan of it, watching it. And then I did an American Haunting, and that's how I really got back into it and sort of said, what, I really like this palette. It's a fun palette to play with as far as filmmaking is concerned. Because you can do a lot of different things, and there's a lot of subgenres. It's not just slasher films. It's not just ghost stories. You can do a ghost story, then you can do a slasher film, then you can do a supernatural thriller. You can have fun, and they're not dramas. They're actually have a lot of fun things to play with as a filmmaker for me, which is exciting because, you know, I like some stunts. I like, you know, special effects makeup. I like shooting off squibs and guns if that's what it calls for, and not just, you know, dramatic scenes. So I like the palette.
And obviously, with these 8 films that you're releasing now,
Mm-hmm.
the whole gamut of horror styles. I mean, obviously, we kind of had the torture porn thing, and then we've gone into the every single 70s horror film has been remade.
Mm-hmm.
But you're kind of standing away from that to a certain extent. I mean, what do you think these 8 films will bring to horror fans who maybe feel that they were getting a bit jaded with the genre now?
Well, I think that we bring fresh films to the genre. I mean, I think, you know, we're bringing new, talented filmmakers, giving them a shot to make their films, and trying to select scripts. We look at between 300 and 500 scripts. So creatively, a year. So just in the genre. Creatively, there's no downturn in the available material. Then we narrow it down to, you know, 8 films that we're actually willing to make. But I think it's good for the fans because, you know, we take a lot of care in making the films. The filmmakers love the opportunity. A lot of great talent came from horror movies in the first place. And so we're not looking to follow the trend that's popular at the moment and saturate it even further like is always done when one thing's, you know, vampires become popular. So then there's like 80 vampire movies, you know? Zombies become popular. Then there's a ton of zombie movies. And we actually did make a zombie movie even though that they're popular, but we did a completely different take on it. So I think that they'll like our movies because they're unique and different, and, you know, there's a lot of them that are scary and they give you the different things. You know, with a festival, we're trying to make 8 different types of horror movies, and it's the fun of the festival, and the brand is sort of the quality of the movies.
And what is it? So is that one of the things you look for in a script then, is just that standout thing, that something that makes it different from
Well, sure. I mean, that's the first thing you always look, in any script you read, you're always looking for that. You're always looking for something that, you know, is different and unique. You know the old story. Most stories have already been done,
Yes.
and, you know, there's just sort of a new, fresh approach to doing them. But sometimes we see stuff like Seconds Apart, which was a fresh, sort of brand new idea, you know, on the Creepy Twin idea. You know, maybe you could call it a bit of a combination of Carrie. But, I mean, really it was its own unique movie, and, you know, when we read the script, we're like, wow, this is pretty cool, and it's different, you know. And so that's why we, you know, went after it, pursued it, and made it. So there's a lot of ideas out there. That's where you look at it in the first place, and you go for the idea, but then it's really story and characters. And then once you think that's okay, then you develop into your sequences and trying to make it scary and building it out.
What about kind of the level? Obviously, horror is always criticised for the level of violence in films. There's always some film that everyone's waving about. I mean, I guess at the moment it's Human Centipede 2. You know, all the newspapers grab onto. So where do you think horror films can go too far, or is that something you worry about when you're
They can go too. I mean, for me personally, no. I mean, you're asking my personal taste, and I say no. But yeah, they can go maybe a little bit too far. But I mean, my theory on that is, you know, if you don't want to watch it, you turn it on for the first 5 minutes, and let's say you're not a horror fan, and you're like, oh my God, and you're aghast at looking at it, well, then turn it off. I mean, seriously, you don't have to keep watching it, then get upset about it, and then start a protest. Just turn it off. I mean, you know, and if you're a fan of it, then there probably is no too far, but, you know, there's different degrees of fans in the genre, and some want the extreme too far, which I understand in some of your horror here. Some of that goes pretty crazy. Yeah. That's why I'm interested to look at some of it, frankly. But on the other side, you know, some people want to have like a middle-of-the-road approach, and some people want a lighter approach. I think those are the degrees of separation there. We don't really consider that in any way, shape, or form when we pick a movie. Again, we're looking for concept, story, characters, and if it happens to be one where, you know, like our movie Re-Kill, where body count's probably 4,000. I mean, that's what it is. There's eyeballs falling out, and people, I mean, it doesn't bother us.
And that's going to, Re-Kill's going to have a theatrical release here.
Yes.
And what can you tell us about the film?
It's a really cool zombie flick. It's a cross between, if I was going to give it a comparison, I'd say it's shot District 9 style for the most of the movie because of the nature of what it is, because it's a TV show within the movie. It's like a cops episode on steroids, but following SWAT teams after 85% of the world's died in the first outbreak, and these SWAT teams are special teams that re-kill zombie uprisings in different parts of the cities across the country so that there's not outbreak 2 to kill the rest of the population. And they film it as it happens. And what you're watching is essentially, so this is the Cloverfield aspect, a lost DVR recording, not lost, but a DVR recording of one of the episodes with commercials cut in, which are like a throwback to like, Total Recall and, those type of commercials, to give you a representation of what the world's like 5 years after an outbreak. So there's commercials about like repopulate America. Have sex, it's good for her, it's good for him, it's good for America, because they need to repopulate. Smoke, because it'll never get you before the Rians do. So the commercials are just backwards, because that's where society is as a result of what's happened. So it's actually really cool. So aside from the produced commercials, it's raw. They pick up whatever little pieces they can. You feel like you're in, for a lot of the battle sequences, Saving Private Ryan for the whole movie, because you're in it. And you're just getting snippets and shit's whizzing by your head, and suddenly there's a zombie on top of the cameraman, trying to buy that. You're in it. And the cameraman's narrating through the whole thing. You never see him. The only thing you see is his point of view, interviewing the characters, asking them questions, and in the middle of the action. And that's the narrative to tell the story. And then through that episode, you find out where the world ends up. So it's actually a cool take on a zombie movie. The script was great, and that's why we ended up doing it, and it turned out well, so then we kept enhancing it, and then there was a lot of interest for it theatrically because, it turned out decently, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, we're excited.
Yeah. So on a film like that, or for any of these films, as a producer, how hands-on are you?
Rekill, I was extremely hands-on. I was there for everything, and, we had a director on the film initially, that didn't work out after the first day, and you asked. So then we had, we brought in this Bulgarian director who's super talented named Val Milev, and I worked with Val right there because we had already had a whole U.S. and British cast there, and we were shooting in Bulgaria. And Val's a great, has a great vision and is a great visualist, and is also a great director, like with actors as well. But there was a translation problem, so I worked very closely with him because him and I had a great communication, even if it was mostly sign language. And so then we would sit there and work together with the actors, and so that one was way more hands-on, but it was by necessity.
Yeah.
Because we were there shooting, and sometimes stuff happens, and you can't just stop, and you're already spending the money, and we're not a major studio. We can't just stop production. We got to find a way to keep going forward, because something like that could be, very damaging for the company, just economically. We want to be able to keep making movies. So that one, extremely hands-on. And some of them more hands-on than others. We make so many films a year that I can't be on every single set. So some filmmakers...
running concurrently?
One is prepping, one is shooting. One is prepping, one is shooting, and they're not necessarily prepping and shooting in the same country. We shoot a lot in Louisiana in the U.S., and we shoot a lot in Bulgaria. Part of why we shoot in Bulgaria is we have great crews in both places, and when we have stuff that's got more action to it, it seems better to do it in Bulgaria because we can put more value on the screen.
We can say they got slacker health and safety laws there.
Well, that's the other thing too. There's always jokes on set. The Bulgarians make it themselves. They're like, oh, you're killing me. It's fine. Give my family 100 love. I was okay. In America, it doesn't work that way. You got to do 7 safety rehearsals before you can shoot. Bulgaria, they go for it. They're nuts. In a good way, the stunt people there.
Yeah.
So, you can really get some cool stuff on film. We got some pretty cool, nasty 28-day later on steroid type zombies running around in Rekill. These things are, vicious.
Cool.
They're not Romero zombies.
They don't shuffle.
No. And they're not saying brains. Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about Husk?
Sure. That was another one I was very involved with. So.
And where was that shot?
Iowa. That one we actually shot in Iowa. We actually grew the cornfield for Husk for 4 months before we actually shot there around the house that we wanted to shoot in, so it would be the right height so we could be there for, it was like almost a 20-day shoot, and get everything we wanted within the different parts of the cornfield where it was structured and around the house, and have the right shadowing and the light beaming down everything. So it was a pretty creepy place to be every single night from sundown to sunup.
That's kind of quite mad. Did you know how tall it was going to be the minute you planted it? I suppose you got corn.
No, we had corn experts there, so we knew how long it was going to take to get to be as tall as we wanted it to be. And part of the mood of a movie like that, especially when you're dealing with scarecrows in the corn and people getting lost in the corn, And the only way they can get to safety is to get out of the corn, which is endless, is to have a lot of corn. I mean, that's it. And it needed to be real corn. And if you want a lot of corn, go to Iowa. I mean, you know, because they got more corn than anybody. And that needed to be authentic. And it worked really well for the movie. The production value of the movie is great. And I think, you know, I don't know if you saw it or not, but I think it's a good, creepy movie. And I think, you know, it's a good throwback to those classic horror movies, you know, like, you know, Texas Chainsaw Massacre type movies where, you know, they get lost in the wrong place, they break down, and then there's something off there. Exactly. It's not right. And when you're walking into that house, I mean, I'm really proud of that. I think it looks great, and I think it feels really classic and creepy and not cheap in any way, shape, or form. And, you know, I'm proud of that movie. I like that movie a lot.
And you mentioned it doesn't look cheap there. I mean, how easy is it for you, especially in today's financial climate, to get funding for these films?
Well, it's never easy to get funding, but I mean, you know, I have certain arrangements set up around the world, and because our brand is doing well for people, we have international, you know, partners, you know, all over the place now, so that helps us fund our films. And we shoot some in places like Louisiana where you get tax credits from the government, so that helps fund the films. And then, you know, we have money in After Dark as well, because, you know, we've made a lot of films, and, you know, it's not just a charity, so we actually bring money in and then reinvest it in making new films, and we have investors. So it's harder. I mean, you know, and I certainly see people in the industry. I mean, you always need a certain amount of what they call equity, which is an investor, to make your film financing complete, especially in an independent film. In a studio film, they pay for the whole movie. But you know the film business, so that's the way it works in independent films. And a lot of equity for films is dried up because people who usually put it in don't have the spare change. You know, usually to what would have been changed to them and is everything to us, you know. Now they don't have it. So we're fortunate in that way, and I hope we continue to be fortunate.
And so finally, I mean, what's next for After Dark? Obviously, you've got these 8 films, they're coming out. Are you already planning the next 8?
Yeah, we've actually shot the first of the next set of 8. We're just about to start production on the second one. We'll announce the whole slate by middle of December, which we're working on, and we've got some really good ones. I think this will be probably the best year of After Dark originals and Horror Fest ever. I mean, we're really sort of found our way. We've got our production machine oiled. We've got the right filmmakers around us. We've been looking at the material well enough in advance, and I think we're making like just a bunch of good horror movies that will really satisfy, and hopefully 2 of them will become like Re-Kill and actually get wider releases. Yeah.
And so finally, I mean, obviously you're just presenting the most recent 8 After Dark originals, but what's next? Do you have the next 8 all ready and roaring to go?
Well, we're ready and roaring to go ourselves. We've shot the first one. The second one starts shooting in a few weeks, and we're announcing the rest of them by middle of December. And I really think we've picked now like the best that we've ever done from all the acquisitions, 4 years, 32 films, the new After Dark originals that we just launched, which we're really proud of. But this year, we've gotten, you know, it straight with the filmmakers. We had time to go through the scripts. Our production machine is well oiled, is a way of putting it. And so,
you know what you're doing.
Yeah, we really think that we've got a really good, cool lineup, and hopefully a couple of them end up, you know, not just going into the festival, but also going wider theatrical, because they've got a shot. Even before we make them, we know that they've got a shot. Besides that, we did 5 action films, which you may or may not know about, with Joel Silver. Cool. And they're After Dark action, the same format, but under 5 films. The first one's finished. The other 4 are filmed. They'll all be completed by early next year, and then out in the States around April.
And doing the same kind of thing, releasing them?
Yep, at 5 together, exactly.
You don't make it easy for yourself, do you? You can't just release one.
No, we don't make it easy for ourselves. And we also did another project with Joel and Dark Castle, his label, which is a movie called Bullet to the Head, which Walter Hill directed and Sylvester Stallone starred in. And that goes out wide through Warner Brothers worldwide, April 13th next year.
Cool. Yeah. That's perfect. Thank you so much for your time today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.